I discovered my husband's 15-year lie about his family. Then I met his dead father at a restaurant. I've been staring at this blank screen for nearly an hour, fingers hovering over the keyboard, deleting and retyping the same few sentences. How do you even begin to explain that your entire marriage has been built on a foundation of lies? That the person you've shared a bed with for 15 years, the father of your children, has been living a double life so elaborate it feels like I've stumbled into some psychological thriller? I guess I'll start with the basics. I'm 42, my husband James is 44, and we have 2 children, Emma, 13, and Noah, 10. We met in college, dated for 3 years, got married, and have lived what I thought was a happy, normal life in suburban Massachusetts. James works in finance, or at least that's what I thought, and I run a small graphic design business from home so I could be present for our kids. The thing about James that first attracted me was his resilience. He'd lost both parents in a car accident when he was 19, right before starting college. He had no siblings, no extended family. Just him against the world. I admired how he'd built himself up from nothing, put himself through school, and created a successful career despite having no safety net. His story of overcoming tragedy was part of what made me fall in love with him. For 15 years, he would occasionally grow quiet on his parents' death anniversary. He kept a single photo of them on our mantle, a middle-aged couple smiling on what looked like a hiking trip. James rarely spoke about them, which I attributed to his grief. Some wounds never fully heal, he told me once, and I respected his boundaries. But it was all a lie. Every single word. It started 3 weeks ago with a misplaced wallet. James had left for a 3-day business trip to Chicago, something that happened every few months. Nothing unusual. Except this time, he called in a panic 2 hours after leaving. "Babe, I think I left my wallet on the nightstand. Can you check? I need it for the hotel check-in." I went upstairs and didn't see it, but while searching, I noticed the corner of something poking out from under his side of the mattress. Thinking it might be the wallet, I lifted the mattress. It wasn't his wallet. It was a passport, but not the one I knew he had. This one had his photo but a different name, Michael Peterson. Same birth date, but it listed his birthplace as Toronto, not Boston. I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. A fake passport? For what possible reason? My first thought was identity theft, maybe someone had stolen his information. But why would that be hidden under our mattress? I continued searching and found his actual wallet in the bathroom. As I picked it up, a small key fell out, not one I recognized from our house or cars. It looked like a safety deposit box key. When I called him back, my voice was shaking. "Found your wallet in the bathroom." "Oh, thank God," he sighed with relief. "I was afraid I'd dropped it somewhere." I almost asked about the passport then, the words were on the tip of my tongue, but something stopped me. An instinct, maybe. Or fear of what the answer might be. "Have a safe flight," I said instead. "Love you." "Love you too," he replied, sounding normal. Sounding like my husband, not a stranger with a false identity. After hanging up, I sat on our bed for nearly an hour, the passport and key in my lap, wondering what to do. Eventually, I decided to look deeper before confronting him. I needed more information. I put everything back exactly where I'd found it. Then I opened his laptop. We knew each other's passwords, no secrets between us. Or so I thought. His email looked normal. Work messages, some communications with clients, nothing suspicious. But when I checked his browser history, I found something odd. He'd cleared it completely. James never cleared his history, he wasn't particularly tech-savvy or privacy-conscious that way. I searched his name in our online banking records and found the expected transactions. Then, on a hunch, I searched Michael Peterson. Nothing came up. That night, I barely slept. My husband of 15 years suddenly felt like a stranger sleeping next to me. Who keeps a false passport? Who was Michael Peterson? And why would James, the most straightforward, practical person I knew, need another identity? The next morning after dropping the kids at school, I drove to our bank. The safety deposit key had a small number engraved on it, and the bank's logo. My hands were shaking as I approached the teller. "Hi, I need to access my husband's safety deposit box," I said, trying to sound casual. "He's away on business and asked me to retrieve some documents." The teller looked at me apologetically. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Collins, but only the registered owner can access their box." I nodded, feeling simultaneously relieved and frustrated. At least I knew the box existed. "That's all right. I'll tell him to come in when he returns," I said, then hesitated. "Just to confirm, This is for James Collins, correct? She typed something into her computer. Actually, this box is registered to a Michael Peterson. Is there another key you might have? My blood ran cold. Sorry, my mistake, I mumbled, walking out quickly before she could see my face crumpling. Back in my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing. James had a safety deposit box under his alias. This wasn't some mistake. This was deliberate. But why? Was he in some kind of trouble? Witness protection? Or was it something worse? Was he hiding something from me specifically? I decided to dig deeper. I drove home and spent hours searching online for anything I could find about James Collins or Michael Peterson. Nothing unusual came up for James, just the expected social media profiles and work-related mentions. Michael Peterson pulled up thousands of results, none that seemed to connect to my husband. Then I remembered James's parents. The ones who died when he was 19. I realized with a start that I'd never seen their death certificates, never visited their graves. He'd said they were cremated and their ashes scattered in the Rockies where they loved to hike. I'd never questioned it. I searched for obituaries, accident reports, anything that might confirm their existence and death. Hours passed with nothing. According to every database I could access, James's parents, Robert and Elizabeth Collins, never existed. By the time I needed to pick up the kids from school, I was shaking. The foundation of my marriage was cracking beneath my feet, and I had no idea how deep the fissures went. That evening, I called my best friend Megan and asked if the kids could sleep over at her house the following night when James returned. I needed space for whatever conversation was coming. She agreed, assuming I was planning a romantic evening. If only. I barely slept that night. Or the next. By the time James's key turned in the lock, I'd worked myself into such a state of anxiety that I felt physically ill. "Honey, I'm home," he called cheerfully, setting down his suitcase. I was sitting at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of cold coffee I hadn't touched. "How was Chicago?" I asked flatly. He came over, kissed the top of my head. "Productive. Closed the Henderson deal." He looked around. "Where are the kids?" "At Megan's for a sleepover." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Oh? Special occasion?" I looked directly into his eyes, the eyes I thought I knew so well. "Who is Michael Peterson?" The change was subtle but unmistakable. A slight tensing around his mouth, a momentary freeze in his posture before he relaxed again. Anyone else might have missed it, but after 15 years together, I knew when my husband was caught off guard. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral as he opened the refrigerator. "I found the passport, James. Under the mattress." He closed the fridge door slowly, then turned to face me. For several moments, he said nothing, just studied my face. "You went through my things," he finally said. Not a question. Not even angry. Just flat. "I was looking for your wallet. You asked me to find it, remember?" My voice was rising. "What I want to know is why my husband has a passport with a different name. And a safety deposit box under that name. And why I can't find a single record that your parents ever existed, let alone died in a car crash." He pulled out a chair and sat down across from me, his face unreadable. "Ellie, it's complicated." Then uncomplicated. I slammed my hand on the table, surprising myself with the force of my anger. 15 years, James. 15 years we've been married, and I don't even know who you are. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "I need you to stay calm and listen to me, okay? I can explain, but it's not what you think." "Oh? What exactly do I think?" I could hear the hysteria rising in my voice. "Because right now, I think I'm married to a stranger. I think my children's father has been lying about his entire life." "Lower your voice," he said sharply, then immediately softened. "Please. I promise I'll explain everything. But I need you to understand that everything I've done, every decision I've made, has been to protect you and the kids." "Protect us from what?" I whispered, suddenly afraid of the answer. He took a deep breath. "My father isn't dead, Ellie. He's very much alive. And he's a dangerous man." What followed was a story so outlandish that if I hadn't already discovered the fake passport, I would have thought James was having some kind of psychological break. According to James, his real name was indeed James Collins, but almost everything else he'd told me about his past was fabricated. His father, Robert Collins, wasn't a loving dad who died in a car accident. He was a high-ranking member of a criminal organization based in Boston. His mother hadn't died alongside his father. She'd fled with teenage James after years of abuse, changing their names and moving frequently to stay hidden. She died when I was 17, James said, his voice hollow. Cancer. By then we were living as James and Catherine Peterson in Toronto. That's why I have the Canadian passport, it was my original new identity. So Michael Peterson. I began. Was the name I used in Canada. When I moved back to the States for college, I reclaimed part of my original identity, James Collins, but kept some documentation as Michael in case I ever needed to disappear again. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process this information. You've been preparing to disappear? All these years? He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. It was just a precaution. My father has connections, Ellie. Dangerous ones. When Mom took me and ran, he swore he'd find us. After she died, I lived in constant fear that he'd track me down. And this justifies 15 years of lying to me? My voice was barely a whisper now. Letting me believe your parents were dead? Creating this entire fictional past? I was protecting you. His eyes pleaded with me to understand. The less you knew, the safer you were. If you ever met him, if he ever found out about you and the kids. What would happen? I demanded. What exactly are you afraid of? James's face darkened. My father doesn't forgive what he sees as betrayal. My mother taking me was the ultimate betrayal in his eyes. And he's patient, Ellie. He'd wait decades for revenge if necessary. So all these business trips, were they even real? He hesitated. Most were. Some were times when I thought I might have been compromised. When I needed to check if we were still safe, if we needed to move. I felt sick. You were planning contingencies to uproot our family without even telling me why? I never had to use them, he said quietly. Until now, I've never had reason to believe he's found me. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. Until now? What's changed? James looked away. 3 months ago, a man came to my office asking questions. Said he was an old friend of the family looking to reconnect. The description matched one of my father's closest associates. And you didn't think to mention this to me? I was shouting now, beyond caring about controlling my emotions. That some dangerous criminal might be looking for my husband? That my children might be in danger? I handled it, he snapped back. I took precautions. I've been monitoring the situation. There's been no further contact. I didn't want to frighten you unnecessarily. I stood up, needing physical distance from him. You don't get to decide what information is necessary for me, James. Or Michael. Or whoever you are. We're supposed to be partners. That means equal information, equal decisions. You don't understand what these people are capable of. Because you never gave me the chance to understand. I cut him off. You robbed me of my agency in my own life by keeping this from me. You made me an unwitting participant in whatever this is. We stared at each other across the kitchen, a room where we'd shared thousands of meals, laughed with our children, built what I thought was an honest life together. I need time to process this, I finally said. I'm going to stay at Megan's tonight. Ellie, please, he reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't touch me right now. I can't. I just need space. As I packed a small overnight bag, James hovered in the doorway of our bedroom. What are you going to tell the kids? The question hit me like a physical blow. Our children. What did all this mean for them? Nothing yet, I said, zipping up the bag. Not until I figure out what I'm going to do. Do? His voice cracked slightly. What do you mean, do? I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt like I was seeing a stranger wearing my husband's face. I don't know if I can stay married to someone I don't know, James. I don't know if I can trust anything about our life together. As I walked out the door, he called after me, everything real between us is real, Ellie. My love for you, for our children, none of that was a lie. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I didn't know what was real anymore. I spent that night at Megan's, sleeping on her couch after making up a story about James and me having a fight about his work hours. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, partly because I was still processing it myself, and partly because I wasn't sure who I could trust anymore. The next morning, I picked up the kids as planned. They were excited about their sleepover and chatted happily on the drive home, oblivious to the fact that their family was fracturing beneath the surface. James was waiting when we got home, his face haggard from lack of sleep. He hugged the kids tightly, then caught my eye over their heads. Can we talk later? He mouthed silently. I nodded curtly, then busied myself with unpacking the kids' overnight bags and starting laundry. Normal Sunday activities. As if everything was normal. That afternoon, James suggested taking the kids to the park so I could have some time alone. I knew it was really to give us a chance to talk later without little ears listening, but I was grateful for the quiet. While they were gone, I started doing what I should have done immediately, researching Robert Collins. If James's story was true, there should be some record of him in connection with criminal activity in Boston. What I found chilled me to the bone. Robert Collins had indeed been a high-ranking member of an organized crime family in Boston throughout the 80s and 90s. There were newspaper articles detailing indictments that never led to convictions, mentions of suspected involvement in everything from racketeering to murder. And yes, there was mention of his wife and young son disappearing in the late 90s, presumed by some to be in witness protection, though others speculated they might have been eliminated due to some internal power struggle. Most disturbing was a quote from a Boston detective who had spent years trying to build a case against Collins: "Robert Collins doesn't forget, and he doesn't forgive. Anyone who crosses him ends up regretting it, if they live long enough to regret anything." I was still staring at my laptop when James returned with the kids. "Mom." Noah burst through the door. "Dad bought us ice cream and I got 2 scoops. "Wow, that's special," I managed, forcing a smile. "Why don't you both go wash up before dinner?" After they thundered upstairs, James approached me cautiously. "You okay?" I was looking him up, I said quietly. "Your father." James's face tightened. And you weren't exaggerating about how dangerous he is." I closed the laptop. "But that doesn't change the fact that you lied to me, James. For our entire relationship." He sat down across from me. "I know. And I'm sorry. But can you honestly say you would have chosen this life if you'd known the truth from the beginning? Would you have had children with me knowing they might someday be targets?" His blunt question struck me like physical blows. Would I have? The truth was, I didn't know. And that uncertainty made me even angrier. "That's exactly my point," I hissed, keeping my voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. "You took that choice away from me. You decided what risks I was willing to take with my life. I was trying to protect you." "Stop saying that." I cut him off. "Protection without consent is just control, James." He fell silent, absorbing the blow. "What do we do now?" I finally asked. "How do we move forward from this?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I want to try. For us, for the kids. Whatever it takes." I studied his face, the face I'd woken up next to for 15 years. The face of my children's father. Despite everything, I still loved him. But love and trust are different things, and he'd shattered the latter completely. "I need complete honesty from now on," I said firmly. "No more secrets. No more lies, even lies of omission. I need to know everything, about your past, about any potential dangers, about your contingency plans. All of it." He nodded slowly. "Everything. I promise." "And we need therapy," I continued. "Both individually and as a couple. This is too big for us to navigate alone." "Agreed," he said without hesitation. "And James?" I leaned forward. "If I find out you're still lying to me about anything at all, I'm taking the kids and leaving. No discussion, no second chances." His eyes met mine, steady and serious. "I understand." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 15 years of deception and the uncertain path forward hanging between us. "Mom? Dad? Can we have pizza for dinner?" Emma called from upstairs, jolting us back to the present reality of our family life. "Sure, honey," I called back, my eyes still locked with James's. "We'll order it in a minute." The next few weeks were some of the most difficult of my life. We found a therapist who specialized in trauma and trust issues. James began the painful process of fully revealing his past to me, the constant moving during his childhood, the fear, the violence he'd witnessed. "My father never hit me," he explained during one late-night conversation. "But what he did to my mother. I still have nightmares about it." His voice broke, and for the first time since this all began, I reached for his hand. We told the children a simplified version of the truth, that Daddy had a complicated relationship with his family and had kept some secrets to protect us, but that he was working on being more honest now. They had questions, of course, but fewer than I expected. Children are remarkably adaptable, sometimes more so than adults. Slowly, tentatively, we began rebuilding. Not the same relationship we had before, that was impossible. Something new, something raw and painfully honest. There were days I couldn't look at James without feeling the betrayal fresh all over again. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I was making a terrible mistake by staying. But there were also moments of connection deeper than we'd ever had before. With the walls of deception torn down, James shared parts of himself he'd kept hidden for decades. I began to understand the frightened boy inside the man, the child who had learned that secrets meant survival, that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. "I never intended to fall in love with you," he confessed one night. "When we met, I was just passing through. Another temporary stop. But then, you happened. And suddenly I wanted a real life. A permanent home. I told myself the past was gone, that I could start fresh with you." "But you never really believed that," I said softly. He shook his head. "I wanted to. God, how I wanted to. But some part of me was always waiting for the other shoe to drop." 4 weeks after my discovery of the passport, we had reached an uneasy new normal. James was more present, more transparent than he'd ever been. I was healing, slowly. The kids seemed to be adjusting to our new family dynamic, though Emma had grown more watchful, more sensitive to tension between us. Then, on a rainy Saturday evening, everything changed again. We were at La Trattoria, our favorite local Italian restaurant, celebrating Noah's science fair win. The kids were happily demolished their pasta, James and I were sharing a bottle of wine, and for the first time in weeks, it felt almost normal. I was laughing at something Emma said when I noticed James go completely still, his eyes fixed on something, or someone, across the restaurant. "James?" I touched his arm. "What's wrong?" His face had drained of all color. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "He's here." "Who?" I asked, though a sick feeling in my stomach told me I already knew. "My father." I followed his gaze to an elegantly dressed older man seated alone in the corner. He was perhaps in his 70s, silver-haired and distinguished-looking, with the same strong jawline as James. Nothing about him screamed dangerous criminal. He looked more like a retired professor enjoying a solitary meal. As if sensing our attention, the man looked up. His eyes, the exact same shade of gray as my husband's, locked with James's across the room. A smile slowly spread across his face. I felt James tense beside me. "We need to leave. Now." "Dad, I haven't finished my dessert," Noah protested as James signaled frantically for the check. "We'll get ice cream on the way home," James promised, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Right now, we need to go." But it was too late. The older man was already approaching our table, moving with the unhurried confidence of someone who always gets what he wants. "James," he said, his voice surprisingly soft and cultured. "It's been a long time, son." James stood, positioning himself between his father and our family. "Robert," he acknowledged coldly. "What are you doing here?" Robert Collins smiled, the expression never reaching his eyes. "Can a father visit his son? Meet his grandchildren?" His gaze shifted to Noah and Emma, who were watching with confused interest. "You must be Noah and Emma. I'm your grandfather. I've waited a very long time to meet you." I found my voice. "Kids, go wait by the door. Now." Something in my tone broke through their curiosity. They slid out of the booth, Emma taking Noah's hand protectively as they moved away. "A wise decision," Robert commented, watching them go. "Children shouldn't witness family disagreements." "We're not family," James said through clenched teeth. "You lost the right to call yourself my father a long time ago." Robert's expression hardened momentarily before settling back into a pleasant mask. "We'll always be family, James. Blood is blood." He turned to me. "And you must be Eleanor. Lovely to meet you at last. I must say, my sources didn't do your beauty justice." A chill ran through me at the casual acknowledgement that he'd had us under surveillance. "For how long? How did you find us?" James demanded. Robert waved a dismissive hand. "Details. What matters is that I've finally found my son after all these years." His voice dropped, becoming something colder, harder. "Did you really think you could hide from me forever? That I would forget what your mother did? What you did?" "We left because you gave us no choice," James said, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "Because you were a monster. Because you nearly killed her more times than I could count." A flash of something, anger? Shame? Crossed Robert's face before vanishing. Ancient history. Water under the bridge. "I'm an old man now, James. I just want to know my family before I die." "You're not welcome in our lives," I said, finding courage I didn't know I had. "Please leave us alone." Robert studied me with those cold gray eyes. "I admire your loyalty, Eleanor. Even after learning what a liar your husband is." He smiled at my startled expression. "Oh yes, I know about your recent discoveries. My sources are quite thorough." My blood ran cold. He had been watching us during our most vulnerable moments. Our most private pain. James took a step toward his father, fists clenched. Stay away from my family. This is your only warning. Robert laughed softly. Oh, James. Still the frightened little boy playing at being tough. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, setting it on the table. When you're ready to have a civilized conversation, call me. I'm staying at the Ritz-Carlton through next weekend. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and James? Catherine would be disappointed in the man you've become. All these lies. She raised you better than that. James lunged forward, but I grabbed his arm, holding him back. Not here, I whispered urgently. Not in front of the kids. As Robert Collins walked away, nodding politely to our children by the door, James sagged against me, his entire body trembling. He's been watching us, he whispered hoarsely. All this time, he's been watching. The drive home was silent except for the children's occasional questions, which we deflected with promises to explain later. Once they were in bed, James and I sat at the kitchen table, the business card between us like a live grenade. What does he want? I asked finally. James shook his head. I don't know. Revenge, maybe. Or control. Everything is a power play with him. You don't think he genuinely wants to reconnect? A bitter laugh escaped him. Robert Collins doesn't do anything without an angle. Whatever he wants, it's not a heartwarming family reunion. I studied my husband's face, seeing the frightened child beneath the adult exterior for the first time. What do we do now? He ran a hand through his hair. We have options. We could run, I have identities prepared, money set aside. We could disappear tonight and be in another country by morning. The fact that he had this all planned sent a renewed shockwave through me. And what kind of life would that be for the kids? Always looking over our shoulders? Never putting down roots? It would be safer than staying here now that he's found us, James argued. You don't know what he's capable of, Ellie. Then tell me, I challenged. Stop protecting me from the truth and tell me exactly what we're dealing with. For the next hour, James detailed his father's crimes, the violence, the manipulation, the network of loyal followers who would do anything for him. By the end, I felt physically ill. There's something else you should know, James said quietly. The safety deposit box? It contains evidence. Evidence? He nodded grimly. Records, photos, accounts of crimes my father committed. Things my mother collected before we ran. I've added to it over the years, it was my insurance policy. If anything happened to me, there are instructions for it to be delivered to the FBI. I stared at him. You've been collecting evidence against your father for 20 years? It was the only leverage I had. If he ever found me, I needed something to keep him at bay. Then use it, I said. Turn him in now. James shook his head. It's not that simple. The evidence is old. Some of it might not hold up. And he has connections everywhere, including law enforcement. If we move against him and fail, there's nothing to stop him from retaliating. We talked in circles until dawn, weighing impossible options, the business card still sitting untouched between us. Finally, as sunlight began filtering through the kitchen windows, I made a decision. Call him, I said. James looked at me like I'd suggested walking into traffic. What? Call him. Set up a meeting. Both of us. Absolutely not, James said flatly. I'm not putting you in his path. I'm already in his path, I pointed out. He's been watching us, remember? At least this way, we control the when and where. It's too dangerous. Everything is dangerous now, I interrupted. At least this way we find out what he wants. And James? This time, we face it together. No more lone wolf protector routine. We're partners in this, equal partners, or we're nothing. He stared at me for a long moment, then slowly reached for the card. We met Robert Collins at a public park the next day. Neutral territory, plenty of witnesses. The children were safely at Megan's house with strict instructions not to leave with anyone but us. Robert was already waiting when we arrived, feeding pigeons on a bench like a harmless elderly man. James, Eleanor. Thank you for coming. He smiled, gesturing for us to sit. Beautiful day, isn't it? Cut the pleasantries, James said tersely. What do you want? Robert sighed. Always so direct. You get that from your mother. He scattered more breadcrumbs before continuing. I want what any father wants, to know his son. To be part of his family's life. That's not going to happen, I said firmly. Not after everything you've done. Robert turned those cold eyes on me. My dear, you've only heard one side of a very complicated story. I've heard enough, I replied, refusing to be intimidated. Perhaps, he conceded. But consider this, I could have approached you differently. I could have simply taken what I wanted. His voice remained pleasant, but the threat was unmistakable. Instead, I'm here, asking nicely. Asking for what, exactly? James demanded. Regular visits with my grandchildren. Monthly dinners, perhaps. The occasional holiday. Nothing excessive. James laughed incredulously. You're delusional if you think I'd ever allow that. Robert's expression hardened. You misunderstand, son. I'm not seeking permission. I'm offering a courtesy by discussing terms. We'll go to the police, I said. We'll get restraining orders. By all means, Robert smiled. But consider what that would mean. A legal battle. Public records. Your children discovering exactly who their father is, and has been hiding from them all these years. He leaned forward. How do you think Emma and Noah would feel knowing their entire family history is a fabrication? That their father has been lying to them since birth? I felt sick. He had us cornered, and he knew it. I've changed, James, Robert continued. I'm not the man you remember. 20 years is a long time. People grow, evolve. All I'm asking for is a chance to prove that to you. And if we refuse? James asked, his voice tight. Robert spread his hands. Then things become complicated. For everyone. He stood up. Think about it. Talk it over. I'll expect your answer by tomorrow evening. He handed James another card. My cell number. Call anytime. As he walked away, I grabbed James's hand, finding it ice cold. He's threatening us, I whispered. That's how he operates, James replied grimly. Velvet glove, iron fist. What do we do? James watched his father's retreating figure. I don't know. But we're not letting him near our children. That much I promise you. That night, after another round of agonizing discussions, I made a decision that would change everything. We need to tell the kids the truth, I said. Not all of it, but enough. They need to understand why they can't go with this man if he approaches them. James looked terrified. They're too young. They're not, I countered. Emma is 13. Old enough to understand that not all family is safe. Noah's 10, the same age you were when your mother first tried to leave, right? He nodded reluctantly. Kids are resilient, James. More importantly, knowledge protects them. Ignorance makes them vulnerable. The next morning, we sat our children down and told them a carefully edited version of the truth, that Daddy's father was not a good man, that he had hurt Daddy's mother, and that's why Daddy had pretended he wasn't alive. Like in witness protection? Emma asked, clearly connecting this to crime shows she wasn't supposed to watch. Something like that, James said gently. The important thing is that if he ever approaches you, at school, at a friend's house, anywhere, you don't go with him, no matter what he says. You find an adult you trust and call us immediately. Is he going to hurt us? Noah asked, his voice small. My heart broke at the fear in his eyes. No, sweetheart. We won't let that happen. But we need you to be extra careful right now. The kids were subdued but understanding. Emma, especially, seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. She hugged her father tightly. I'm sorry your dad is bad, she whispered. But you're the best dad ever. I watched as James held our daughter, tears streaming down his face, and knew we'd made the right choice. No more secrets. No more lies. Whatever came next, we would face it as a family, openly and honestly. That afternoon, James called his father. We've discussed your proposal, he said, his voice steady. And our answer is no. We don't want you in our lives. Not now, not ever. There was a long silence on the other end. That's disappointing, James. I'd hoped we could resolve this amicably. It is resolved, James replied. Stay away from us, or I'll release everything I have to the authorities. Every record, every photograph, every witness statement. I've kept insurance, father. More than you know. Another pause. You're bluffing. Try me. James's voice was deadly calm. You taught me to always have leverage, remember? It's one of the few useful lessons you gave me. This isn't over, Robert said, his cultured voice finally showing cracks of anger. Yes, it is, James countered. I've already made copies of everything. If anything happens to any of us, anything at all, it all goes public. Walk away, father. Enjoy your retirement. Forget we exist. He hung up before Robert could respond, then looked at me with a mix of terror and exhilaration. I've never stood up to him before, he whispered. I pulled him into my arms. You did good. Really good. For 3 days, we lived in tense anticipation. I barely let the kids out of my sight. James installed new security systems and checked into temporary witness protection, which was denied without evidence of an immediate threat. On the 4th day, a letter arrived by courier. Inside was a single sheet of expensive stationery with a handwritten message. You win, for now. But remember, James, I'm a patient man. R. Accompanying it was a small, tarnished silver compass, a childhood possession James had mentioned during therapy as the one gift from his father he'd treasured. It's a message, James said shakily. He's saying he can find me anytime. Or, I suggested, studying his face, it could be a white flag. A parting gift. James shook his head. You don't know him like I do. No, I agreed, taking his hand. But I know you. And you're stronger than you realize. Stronger than him. That was 6 months ago. Robert Collins checked out of the Ritz-Carlton the day after sending that letter. According to James's contacts, he returned to Boston and hasn't left since. We've seen no sign of him or his associates, though James remains vigilant. We continue with therapy, both individually and as a couple. The children know enough to be careful but not so much that they live in fear. Slowly, day by day, we're rebuilding our family on a foundation of truth rather than lies. I won't pretend it's been easy. There are still nights I wake up and look at my husband, wondering if I really know him. There are days the anger returns, fresh and raw, over the years of deception. But there are also moments of profound intimacy that we never had before. With his masks finally down, James has allowed himself to be truly vulnerable with me for the first time. I've seen his fears, his regrets, his hopes. I've come to understand that his lies, while never excusable, came from a place of deep trauma and desperate love. Would you do it differently, if you could go back? I asked him recently as we lay in bed, the moonlight casting shadows across our room. He was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. Finally, he turned to me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. Yes, he said simply. I would have trusted you with the truth from the beginning. I see now that secrets don't protect people, they only postpone pain and compound it. I reached out and touched his face, this man I had chosen, this complicated, flawed, loving human who had finally found the courage to be honest. Then we've both learned something. And maybe that's the best we can hope for. Is Robert Collins truly out of our lives for good? I don't know. James doesn't believe so, and perhaps he's right to be cautious. But I refuse to live our lives waiting for the other shoe to drop. We've strengthened our family through honesty. We've prepared our children as best we can. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together, no more secrets between us. Sometimes I think about that moment in the restaurant, when I first saw the man who had cast such a long shadow over my husband's life. He hadn't looked like a monster. He had looked like what he was, an aging man desperate to control what he couldn't possess. There was something almost pitiful in that. James Collins may be his father's son in blood, but in every way that matters, he's chosen a different path. Every day, with every honest word and vulnerable moment, he proves that our pasts may shape us, but they don't define us. And that, I think, is the greatest victory of all.